my shepherd is. Welcome everybody to live Q&A. I hope we actually are live, but this is Q&A. This is Pastor in the Recovering Heretic, which has been a while, so if you have forgotten, I am Pastor Dave, and with me is Dan, our resident Recovering Heretic. How are you, Dan?
I am still recovering.
Okay. It's a long recovery period.
It is a very long. I think it's going to be a lifetime.
Okay. It's like a persistent condition.
Yes, I think so. As it should be.
As it should be.
For the benefit of all. And yeah, it's been a while, but several Sundays ago, there was the Augsburg Confessions came up.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would be good to talk about that in the Q&A. Because I got the impression from what you were saying when you were presenting it in church, that the Augsburg Confessions are basically the foundation documents of the Lutheran Church.
Yes.
And in that sense, the very foundation of the Reformation itself.
Yeah, sort of.
Although obviously things began splitting and branching
right.
very
Things
quickly.
went in very different directions in many ways quickly after that, but yes.
So first, I remember you and I talking, and you said actually it's the Augsburg Confession.
Yes.
As opposed, but why do we say Augsburg Confessions then?
Well, there's the Lutheran Confessions, and then there's the Augsburg Confession, which is one of a couple different confessions within a larger book we call the Book of Concord.
Okay.
Which is like the mother tome of Lutheranism. You know,
it's the reference of references.
Yeah, it contains all the authoritative documents that define what we believe as Lutherans. It begins with the Augsburg Confession, you know.
Yeah. And why is it called a confession? Did they go up and say, well, we did this wrong, we did this wrong?
No, it's like confess, like, this is what I believe. You know, that's what historically, when Christian bodies use the term confession for a document, it's a statement of belief.
Okay.
You know, so you get things like the Augsburg Confession, or like the most recent one was like the Belgic Confession, which has to do with like race around South Africa and things like, you know, like things like that, right?
Okay.
You know? So
it's not, I have sinned and here's my list.
No, it's, you know, this is what we... You know, this is what we believe. Sometimes generally, sometimes related to a specific issue, you know. You know, there's the confession, the confessing church wrote in Nazi Germany, which is, you know, very tailored to Nazi appropriation of the church and things like that. There's the most recent one that, like, the Reformed wrote was about race in South Africa, you know, and things like that.
Okay. So let's get back to
race, and was on their minds with South Africa, but
okay.
Yeah, race in general.
Let's go chronological through it then.
Okay.
And start with the Augsburg Confession.
Okay.
What were they confessing that had to be confessed? You know, I assume it was...
It's basically, what is Lutheranism?
Okay.
What do Lutherans... So...
As opposed to, but it's not quite a creed, right? This is...
No, because it's much longer than a creed. You know, it's basically, it starts with like literally, it's 28 articles, something like that. 28 articles. And it starts with like God the Father, you know, and it's like 2 to 3 sentences. They'll say, we believe, and then they'll say, condemned are various things that they disagreed with,
okay.
You know, and various errors they thought, various heresies from long ago or more recent ones, you know.
And this is all in contrast to the Roman Catholic Church.
No, well, okay, so the history of it is that Luther starts the Reformation. We've been over that. Emperor Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire is terribly interested in putting this issue to bed, you know, because he wants to invade the Ottoman Empire.
And he doesn't want this distraction.
Right, and like he doesn't really need a religious brouhaha bordering on civil war in a major portion of his empire, going on while he's trying to invade the Ottoman Empire, And so at various points in the Reformation, Charles V basically summons everybody and tries to get them on the same page because, again, he really wants to go fight the Turks.
Okay.
That's his motivation.
And so all these religious people are ruining his political plans.
They're ruining my plans to be the universal monarch of Christian monarch. Like he's trying to establish what's called the universal monarchy. He's trying to be the one king among kings in Christendom.
So he wants true empire.
Right. He wants true empire. He's pretty dang close. Charles V is probably the closest one person has come to ruling the planet. He's king of Austria-Hungary, the Holy Roman Emperor, which is Germany and northern Italy. He's Lord of the Netherlands, king of Spain.
Wow.
And Belgium. And this is Spain and all her overseas colonies. So
the whole
colonial Spanish Empire.
Yeah. Wow.
So pretty dang close, right? Like pretty big guy. So one of these things he did is he summoned the Lutheran party, the Lutheran princes, and said, give me a full accounting, give me in the church, me and the papal legate, papal representative, a full accounting of what you actually believe. And you will do this in front of the imperial legislature, which was gathering because the legislature moved where it gathered. Mm-hmm. So you will be gathering at the imperial legislature or diet at Augsburg this year. Hence the Augsburg Confession.
Yeah.
So you will be doing this at Augsburg. Okay. So the Lutherans write 28 articles about what they believe, right? They do not have Luther write it. They have Melanchthon write it because they're trying to be conciliatory. They're actually aiming for unity. So if you read the actual Augsburg Confession, it sounds it's trying to emphasize how alike we are. So it's always about whenever it's condemning somebody, it's like, we condemn all the same heretics you do. And, we agree on these things, right? They actually purposefully told Luther he wasn't allowed to write it because he pissed too many people off, basically. They said, Melanchthon has to write it. You're not allowed. Furthermore, at this point, Luther's not even allowed in Augsburg because he'll be arrested for being a heretic. So he's not even allowed to go. He kind of sits on the border and mopes.
Why would he be arrested for being a heretic, but the others have free passage? If they're still Lutheran, if they're still following.
Because it's not all Lutherans. There's a specific papal bull against him.
Okay.
So
he led the others astray, so the others...
Right. It's him.
They have some tolerance.
There's a specific papal bull against him.
Okay.
That's how it usually works with heretics, right? If you want to eliminate all heretics, then you call a crusade.
Okay. So, otherwise, you go for the head.
Right, the head, right.
Okay.
So they publish their confession in advance, and then the Catholics respond, and the Catholic Party, I forget what the document's called, but you can go find it actually, but it's the Catholic response, and it's clear that they're walking into this is not going to be a conciliatory meeting. They're walking into hostility.
Okay.
So
the Catholic response, they clearly did not resonate with the conciliatory tone.
Right. They were not picking up on the conciliatory, and so from there you get something called the defense of we call it the apology to the Augsburg Confession, or the defense of the Augsburg Confession, which is kind of like the annotated notes. It's these long essays on the disputed articles. The Catholics they didn't dispute every article. There were some articles they didn't really have a problem with.
Okay.
You know.
So some they did say, yeah.
Well, like the first 3 articles are like God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and it's saying we believe everything in the Nicene and Apostles' Creed about God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And,
so what's to disagree on there?
right. And the Catholic Church is like, okay, good. We're glad we're on okay. You know. But then you have like Article 4, which is justification, you know, which is like there are big problems on just big disagreements on justification, you know. So at that point, then they let Luther off the leash. And Luther and Melanchthon team up to write the defense. So the defense, it's really funny. The apology sounds, or the actual confession itself sounds really conciliatory. The defense of it sounds like we let pit bulls off the leash, you know, to unleash the guard dog.
Yeah.
You know, the attack dog.
Release the Kraken.
Right, release the Kraken. Like, it's really like going at it, you know, because by then the waters had been soured, you know, so that's where we get the Augsburg Confession. That's Confession 1.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are then, do you remember all 28?
Oh, God, no.
But, you know, for specifics on what they did agree on and didn't agree on.
Yeah.
So we got 1 through 4.
So 1 through 3 are...
And we've got 75% agreement, so that seems pretty good on the first 4.
Right. 1 through 3 is like I'm God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. 4 is justification. That's the most important article of the whole thing.
Well, since it's the most important, then explain what is justification.
So how is your relationship made right with God? You exist in this state of broken relationship with God, and how is that relationship made right? You know, and this is the dispute of the Reformation, right? You know, Luther would say it is made right solely by faith through grace, or by grace through faith. That's how that's supposed to go. You know, by God's grace, made active in your life through faith. You know, and you need not do anything in order to receive that promise. The Catholic Church would say it's by God's grace, but it's by God's grace allowing you to then make right decisions, allowing you to do works of charity and love. You know, it's through grace and love is what they would say.
Okay.
At that point.
And the love is evidentiary through the actions you do.
Right. I say love. They would say through grace and charity, you know, but charity and love back then are the same word, you know, but it's through active works of loving your neighbor, you know, that's allowed to happen in your life because of God's grace, you know.
So you do good deeds because of God's grace, basically.
Well, we both believe that, but it's like they would say you're allowed to, those good deeds count toward your salvation, you know, because God has given you this grace that allows you to make right decisions again, you know. It's both, there's both a because of, but it's actually kind of a nuanced debate when you get to it. Like, it's not just simply works versus faith. But Luther's point is your works don't count at all towards your salvation. Now you need to do them because your neighbor needs them, says Luther, you know. Mm-hmm. But Luther's line is, you know, God doesn't need your good works. Your neighbor does, is Luther's line, you know. The Catholic line, I was just telling Bible study this, that drove Luther crazy was God, try your best, God forgives the rest. Now that sounds fine, except if you're got OCD/clinical depression like Luther does, you know, then Luther was driven crazy by this line because he's like, well, how do I know what my best is? You know, and he'd be like, what happens if I only give 99%? Does that mean I'm damned because I haven't given my best? You know, what happens if I don't know that it's my best? You know, what happens if I give my best, but I don't know that's my best? You know, and so I think I can do better. Does that mean I could do better? You know, he gets lost in this, you know, endlessly, which is why he kind of spiritually gets to the point of saying, you know,
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't, well, right. These things don't matter for your salvation. God doesn't evaluate you this way.
Okay. So what about 5 then? Confession number 5.
Oh, why don't you just look it up? I forget what 4, 5, and 6 all run together because they're all kind of, I think 5 is like good works. How good works work in the system. 4, 5, and 6 kind of, they're all part of the same defense article. In the apology, they're all the same article. It's like 4, 5, and 6 are defended together. Yeah, so I don't have my cell phone on me, so
Yeah, I'm looking it up now.
Yeah.
We pause now for station identification. All right, here we go. All right, the 28 articles. Mm-hmm. All right, number 2 is original sin.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Right. So
Okay.
original sin. We all agreed on original sin.
Okay, so we agree on that.
3.
And I've got to ask about that. Maybe that's another topic for some other point. Original sin's always bothered me. You know, I was nowhere close to Adam and Eve when they did this stuff. So why should I inherit a bad decision they made?
Well, I mean, my response to that is 90% of all American, no American alive today was in time remotely close to decisions made by slave owners, right? Yet the country still feels the effect of slavery, in a very real way, right?
Yeah.
Like, including down to like, where do African Americans still live in the country, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And we've explored extensively in another church I'm working with. It's systemic racism,
right? So
and it's very evident.
If you want to change original sin to systemic sin,
I can wrap my head around that.
You can then, it's the system got broke, and out of the breaking of the system, we all exist within a system of brokenness,
And that's what original sin
and that's
actually
what original
is.
sin is.
I can dig that.
That's my simple answer to it.
Okay, 3, Son of God, which we just talked about justification by faith. 5 is the office of preaching.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah. So these all kind of run together because they're all the same defense article. So for Lutherans, the office, preaching's the preeminent thing, right? Because it's through hearing the word, law and gospel, that you trust that you are forgiven. And so the sermon becomes preeminent in a way it's not for Catholics. This is still true to this day, right? A Catholic homily is usually very different than even a Lutheran homily, right? In the sense that, like, I've got a very clear structure. It's got to have law, it's got to have gospel. If it doesn't have those two things, it's not a sermon, it's a speech.
Okay.
If you don't walk out of it both convinced I am a sinner and, Jesus Christ forgives my sin, I and Keith have failed in our task that day.
Okay. Versus a homily, how does a homily different from that then?
Well, like a Catholic sermon probably doesn't have that tight focus on both I've got to convince you if you're a sinner and I've got to convince you that Jesus Christ is the grace, right? A Catholic sermon may be about a topic, so abortion or, or climate change or, might be an ethical point, and it's like, that's all nice, but I would never do that in a sermon, because that's not a sermon literally in our doctrine. A sermon is through law and gospel, the office of preaching is given to the church so that people may be forgiven and things like that.
So again, like a lot of what Luther espoused, there still has to be an actual tie to the Bible itself.
Yeah, tied to the Bible, and you actually have to hear it. You can't just assume it.
Okay.
So
Steve has a question. Is there a reason in the order of articles that it goes, excuse me, Steve did not sneeze, that it goes God, sin, Son of God?
If you want to think about it, creator, problem,
Solution.
I would think about it that way.
Okay.
It's also kind of the way the creeds go, if you think about it, right? God the Father, the creator, Jesus for us and for our salvation, he came down from heaven.
Yeah.
The Nicene Creed, right? That implies sin and then you get into who Jesus actually is and what he did, And
Yeah.
so it's kind of, it's a creedal format,
So it reflects all that. Cool. Nice and easy. And Steve says he's got it.
Right.
So that was a good, very clear. All right, number 6, of the new obedience.
Yeah, so this is the one where it's like, why do we do good works if they don't count, and where does that flow from in sanctification and things? How are you made holy and that kind of stuff,
And that does get to a good question. I can see Catholics raising, having been one.
Right. Why do you need to do this if they don't count for your salvation?
Yeah, and that is the thing, because there are people who say they follow the creed, the Nicene Creed, but go out and do evil things.
Yeah.
So if they have faith, but they're still doing evil things.
Right. The Lutheran response is twofold. It's first, if you do have true faith, you'll just kind of naturally do, quoting Jesus. Jesus says a good tree produces good fruit, and so it's like just kind of naturally, if you do have faith, you will do these things. It's not that you need to do them for your salvation, you'll just do them,
By the very nature of
nature of who you are.
So is that a litmus test? If people are doing evil things, but they claim to have faith, they don't really?
You're not really supposed to work it backwards like that. Some Christians do. There are cautions against working it backwards because the good and the bad, getting back to that original sin problem, right? The good and bad that you do is still caught up in a web of sin, right? So even at the best of your intentions, there's still flaw in there, right? Like, my example for this is electric cars, right? And I think they're wonderful things, actually. And they're meant to solve a very real problem of sin, right? Which is how we treat the environment. And yet the minerals we use for those batteries, right, are basically like fueling a civil war in the Congo, and lots of other places where they're available, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, I think like even at our best of attempts trying to fix the environment, we're still bound up in this kind of web of messiness, and so reasoning it backwards like that gets troublesome unless you're dealing with a real, what they used to call public sinner, somebody who just truly is unrepentantly shameless, then maybe you can reason it backwards. But
so it kind of puts a different spin on the phrase "no good deed goes unpunished."
Right. Yeah. Right.
Every good deed still has some bad fallout on it.
Yeah, it does. There's no flawless solution to any of the problems we face.
Yeah.
So, so working it backwards like that can be difficult.
Okay. Well, Steve has a follow-up. How many people worked on the Augsburg Confession, and did this get shopped around before being submitted? I think you did touch on this a little earlier.
Melanchthon was a guy named Philip Melanchthon, who was Luther's right-hand man, and his fellow teacher at Wittenberg was the main author.
So he had also been an Augustinian monk?
No, he was a Greek professor. Yeah.
Okay, so at Wittenberg you did not have to be a monk or a priest.
No, Luther was a monk who was assigned. He was a monk and a priest who was then paid by the order because they recognized his intelligence to get a doctorate, and then he was stationed at
Wittenberg.
Okay.
Okay.
Because the prince, we call him the Prince Elector of Saxony. The Holy Roman Emperor was elected, but was elected by 7 people.
Huh.
There were 7 princes. We call them the electors, the Prince Electors. 3 were bishops, 4 were temporal lords. And whenever a new emperor, they elected a new guy.
Gotcha.
So one of those guys is Luther's lord. We call him Frederick the Wise, the Elector of Saxony.
Okay.
And so he's Prince of Saxony, and this is why he can tell the emperor to go hang it when he's like, I want to arrest Luther. He's like, well, you can't in my territory, that's because I'm on the council that elects you. So,
yeah. So it's like he's on the board of directors of the
right.
Holy
I'm
Roman
on the
Empire.
board, and I'm, in my territory, you can't tell me what to do. This kind of that kind of thing. So, so he creates he wants a new university in Germany because he's tired of people going to Paris or Italy, and so he creates a university in Wittenberg, Germany, within his territory. And to staff that, he asks the monks to send a couple people, one of whom is Luther, and then it turns out Luther is his rock star professor, and then Melanchthon is a theologian, but he's not a clergy, and he's a Greek professor.
Okay. So then when it was done, did he shop it around? Did he get opinions from other
Yeah, he got it from
theological
there were other
things,
people in the camps, other reformers that he, other Lutherans that Martin Bucer, I think, was on that, something like that. There were other people he shopped it around, but it was mostly Melanchthon,
And then it went and didn't go well.
Right, and it didn't go well.
Right.
So
We are, intriguingly to me, because I didn't sense time going by this fast, but we're out of time already.
Okay.
So you want to continue this?
We can.
We can go down the articles then in the
we
next
can go down
session.
the articles. We can, right. The Book of Concord has the Augsburg Confession, its apology or its defense. Then it has the large and the small catechisms, right? Luther's large and small catechism. Then it has something called the Small Cad Declaration, which is another confession written right before the Empire and the Lutheran princes went to war. And that one's very hot. That one's, they let Luther fully off the leash to write that one. They're like, go.
Yeah. And then right up to the South Africa and racism?
No, that's in the Reformed church. Those are all Reformed confessions. See, in our church, we don't acknowledge new, like our confessions are what we call historic, and so they're things that can't be altered, but in the Reformed church, while they have historic confessions, they can alter them, altering them is bad in Lutheranism for us. So, and then the final thing is something we call the Formula of Concord, which deals with a bunch of theological controversies after Luther died. Lutheranism kind of split into 2 parties about issues like predestination and things like that, and it's coming to conclusions on those topics.
Then let's definitely do this then. That's going to be the plan. The next episode, we'll continue going through the original Augsburg Confession articles and some explanation on that, and then we'll progress chronologically up to that final one.
Yeah, the Formula of Concord.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think we got a couple more weeks on working on this. I know we're off next week because there's a committee meeting, the new ministry, or is that just Keith? Are you
That's Keith. I could probably be here. So,
all right, so we'll continue next week
Okay.
as this goes. So Steve, get those questions ready. Other people as well. Renee, before we go, did you have any questions on the Augsburg Confession? Nothing. All right, so until next week,
See ya,
take it
folks.
from Article 6.